Hey everyone, Mike Wilson here with Processology. I will be your host today for the Hug event. We're going to be talking about custom objects. If you've been here before, welcome back. If this is your first time, um, welcome. As usual, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A. I'll try to look through the chat as much as I can if I see something there, but the Q&A is always going to be the best place. You'll see that at the bottom of your screen. You should see a place where you can click over to the Q&A section. We'll give it a couple of seconds, see if we get a couple more individuals inside of the event with us. Again, like I said, we're going to talk about custom objects. We'll talk about some use cases for custom objects, what they are, what are some of the benefits, and what are some of the things you want to think about before considering custom objects. And then I'll do a live demo after that, and also share some things around some new HubSpot stuff around custom objects. So hopefully we'll have an exciting event today talking about this, and love to have your questions. In the meantime, love to know where you guys are from. What area are you in the DFW area? Are you outside the DFW area? Love to know. Drop them in the chat. I am in Dallas, North Dallas, borderline Addison is where I'm located. But Fort Worth, nice. Nice, Fort Worth. I actually, I'm originally from California, so I'm one of those ones that migrated over. And when I moved here, I originally moved over to Fort Worth, London. Nice. Well, thanks for joining us. I originally moved over to Fort Worth, so loved it over there, stockyards and all that good stuff. Good times over there. So. All right, so I'm not going to waste too much more time. I'm going to go ahead and jump in, and whoever's late can either catch up on the recording, so that we can make sure we're respectful of your time. Today's call we're allotted for 11 to 12 Central Time. Usually these don't go that long, depending on the amount of questions that we have, but I always try to leave a little extra room in there. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, so as I mentioned today, we're going to be talking about custom objects in HubSpot. Custom objects are going to be a way of integrating more capabilities into your HubSpot system. So when you think about HubSpot, the things that are coming out of the box, right? We have our contacts, our companies, our deals, and things like tickets. These are great for some organizations that may be all they need. But when you want to unify your systems and start to do other things without having to have 15 or 20 different tools, you can do some of this in HubSpot by expanding the capabilities of HubSpot. So a custom object is just what I said, expanding HubSpot. It's essentially a database of information. And as you can see here in our drawing here, our graphic we have, is like we can add things like pets, visits, appointments to HubSpot. So in this case, we have a vet that may need to track a pet owner being a contact, and they need to track the pet themselves, as well as the visits that pet may have and appointments. So custom objects allow us, versus having a third-party tool that we have to integrate with HubSpot, it's going to allow us to bring those databases of information into the HubSpot system. So it's going to allow us to expand the structure, unify the data, and tailor HubSpot to your processes and your needs. Right? The benefit of this is now we have unified data, we have our people in one place, we have our processes in one place, and we have all of our technology under one source of truth. Right? So I got this quote that Elon Musk said, the best part is no part. And then I went and kind of put on here, the best integration is no integration. So now what I will say about that is there are times when integration is going to be necessary or be useful. However, I'm just a huge believer that if you don't have to have a third-party integration, it's just going to be easier to manage, easier to adopt, and so on. So again, custom object is going to be a way to expand HubSpot's capabilities in the way that you use the system. So let's talk about a couple of questions that you may have, like questions we want to ask ourselves around custom objects. So do you need a custom object, right? So one of the things that we see sometimes, once an organization learns that custom objects are possible, then they go object crazy, as I like to say, and they want to build an object for everything. But that's not always necessary. So an object is going to be great if it is something that you need to track historical data on, meaning that I need to track notes on this specific object. So, for example, a pet, I may want to track notes on that pet and updates on that pet. If I need to do tasks like maybe to follow up, maybe to check something or do something, maybe to order something, I'm going to be able to do that on the pet directly or on the visit object. So if I want to be able to track every single visit, that's why if you saw in that graphic, we had visits. We want to track every visit. What did we do in that visit? What happened? And then we have appointments, right? When are we planning to have the pet in our office? That is a way that we can track that as well. Now, you might find that in a case like that, you might be able to just use the appointments or the calendar tool in HubSpot to track those appointments. Therefore, you don't need the appointments object, right? You can just do it based on your calendar. That may be a use case for some. But if you want to keep the historical data on appointments and be able to track certain things in appointments and customize that to your needs, then an object may be better, more beneficial. So sometimes things can be just tracked in a drop-down property on the contact or on the pet. So we don't need to have additional objects for that. There are also times where you may have, I'm going to say, an existing object that could work. So a lot of times we see this like with Service Hub, you have tickets, right? So we've used Service Hub for onboarding, customer support. We use Service Hub for things like grant management in some cases, depending on the needs. And so in those cases, you may be able to use an existing object, but just implement the process into that object. So I always say, if you don't need an object, don't create an object. In HubSpot, objects are limited to your plan, so you can't just create unlimited objects. So that's something to keep in mind. I believe if you're on enterprise, it's like 20 objects that you can do in terms of custom objects. And I believe if you're on professional, it's like 10 or 15. So keep that in mind. Some of the other things you want to think about is what type of data do we need? So inside of our object, what do we want to track, right? On a pet, I may want to track like the breed, the age, any like known medical conditions. I may want to track things like maybe something like living circumstances or something like that. So whatever that data, those data points are, we want to think through that. If we're talking about something like a shop or a dealership, right, our custom objects, which you'll see in the next page, will be like cars. And that car, I may want to track the make, the model, the year, the color, right? So that's when I say, what data do you need? You're going to want to think through some of that stuff to know if there's a lot of data like that that you're going to need, then a custom object might be a good choice. Otherwise, you're going to have all of this data piled up into a contact or into a company. And where that can get a little tricky on things is that if you need to change that data, right, then you're going to override existing data. So having custom objects allows you to, again, create multiple objects. Maybe you have a person that has multiple pets or multiple cars. Objects are going to be great to store that data. And then how should this information be associated with other objects, right? So as you saw in our screen where we had the lines connecting, where we had a pet connected to a contact and a visit connected to a pet, is how do we want to associate our data with these objects, right? So now we're putting in a new database and we need to make sure that the relationships of that database match others. So a pet should have a contact, an owner, as well as a visit should be linked to the pet that actually was the item that visited, right? Same thing with a car. We may have a car and we may have a maintenance job that we want related to the car, but that car is related to our contact. So how do we want to structure those relationships as well? And we'll talk about some of this when we do the live demo a little bit later in the call, in the meeting. Okay, so what are some of the benefits of doing this and why would we want to do this, right? So some of the benefits are going to be reporting insights. Some of this stuff, and I'll tell you guys, I just scraped right from HubSpot in terms of how they market this, and some are my own. But you're going to want to report on insights, specific objects. One of the cool things about objects and about HubSpot in general is if I build a custom object like cars, if I build a custom object like pets or whatever it is that I want to build, I actually can run reporting not only on that object, but items associated with that object, right? So for example, I can say I want to see all contacts that have more than one car or all contacts that have more than one pet associated. So that's going to allow you to really get specific with your data and your insights and to understand your audiences better. All of this data is going to help you market better and sell better. So having it all in one place, again, gives you that unified system, that unified data that's going to allow you to segment and market and sell in ways that may have been difficult, if not impossible, to do when you have third-party integrated systems to track that data. The other thing I want to talk about is workflows. So when we start to think about automations and how we can automate based on this data, custom objects are supported within workflows. So you can even automate based off of certain things. If a dog turns a certain year, maybe you want to send out a happy birthday to the owner of that pet, or give a free item, a free trim or something like that. If you have a car and you're doing, like, let's say you're a shop and you're doing oil changes and you estimate that, hey, a car is probably going to drive X amount of miles within the next 3 months. At that time, let's trigger a workflow that sends a coupon for an oil change, maybe, something like that. So because you can use that data in workflows, you can now start to automate things like that. So maybe a car needs maintenance, and that client does not decides not to do the maintenance today. Maybe you have a trigger of when to follow up with them in the future. Those types of things. It's also going to give you that 360 view of your contacts, companies, and really all of your records, right? So if we start to think about these objects that we're talking about, I know how my contact is interacting. I know how companies are interacting. I know how pets are interacting. I know how these cars are interacting, how often are they coming in, how's the mileage changing, things like that. What is their health, their medical history, things like that. I can track all of that within HubSpot. So I have a full view of what's happening when I start to build out my custom objects to really start to tailor my business. When we start to think about things like easier enablement, adoption, and collaboration, if you've used HubSpot, whether you're currently on it or you're on an active subscription or you're on a trial, if you've seen HubSpot, if you're in a contact, a company, a deal, a ticket, they basically look the same, right? Feel the same. This is great for adoption, great for enablement, because it's not very difficult to learn a new object. When you have a custom object, it's going to look the same as contacts, same as companies. The only thing that's different is the data, but everything else functions essentially the exact same way. So this is just going to allow you to cut your cost and time that it takes to get on new employees and new team members onto the platform. It's also just going to be a lower cost of ownership and management. The reason for that is that if we're paying for 10 third-party softwares to track this information, now we have to also manage 10 softwares. We have to train on 10 softwares, and we have to try to integrate data with 10 softwares. And we have subscriptions with 10 softwares, right? So all of that ownership can come into the HubSpot system itself and work. Now, one key thing for me to point out here with custom objects that is extremely important that is that custom objects are typically only available on enterprise level plans. So as long as you have one enterprise level seat, you should be fine, and it will unlock the custom objects module or capability. We'll talk about a little bit something that new came out with HubSpot recently that allows, if you're not on enterprise, to still take advantage of some of the object features that we'll talk about a little bit later in this event. Okay, so these are some use cases that I wanted to talk through of where you can see custom objects, use case for custom objects. So for example, if you're looking at a vet, an existing object is going to be your contacts. That's already in the system when you purchase it out of the box. But the custom objects you would have would be like pets, visits, appointments, and payments. Now, HubSpot technically has Commerce Hub for payments, but those payments don't always fit for everybody. So if you just need to, maybe you're doing a third-party credit card system or something like that, or some other method, maybe you're taking cash or something, and you need to be able to track those payments. Creating a object to do that is a great way to be able to still get that data into the system. If you're a dealership, you're going to look at your contacts, but also your prospects. I named this prospect just because I think it's a little bit easier to understand, but basically we would use the lead object inside of HubSpot for this. And then our custom objects are going to be our cars, our applications, our appointments, our jobs, right? So maintenance, and then payments as well. So we may want to track payments for those jobs. So the benefit that you're going to see in here when you start to think about these payments, while both of these have payments, the beautiful thing about custom objects and about other objects even in HubSpot is that we have the ability to customize the type of data that we're tracking, meaning that for the vet, the payment properties that are in there, the data we're tracking might be different from the dealership, right? This stuff here might actually have parts included on that payment. It might actually have vehicle information related to the payment or job number related to the payment, things like that, that you may not need in the event side. So the fact that you can customize it to your needs is going to be the benefit. When we start to think about schools, we're looking at contacts, cases. And when I say cases, we're talking about tickets within HubSpot, right? You can use your ticket object. So instead of me building a custom object to manage cases, I would just use the ticket object and just customize that to my needs. Prospects, again, individuals that may be considering going to our school. When we start to think about what the custom objects look like, this could be classes, teachers, students, volunteers, clubs, fundraising campaigns, enrollments, applications, tuition, and again, payments. So we have a number of things that we can build out for schools to make sure that we're tailoring HubSpot for that management. Now, the benefits of doing this again is that when you start to think about your outreach, right, all of your marketing, your content, your website, your landing pages, your forms, your SMS stuff, all your communications are in HubSpot, right? So now you start to see, like, when you have this data, how I can start to communicate with different audience. Maybe I need to send something out to my teachers. Maybe I need to send something to my students. So I'm going to send to the contacts of my students, right? When I start to think about enrollments, are they enrolled this year? I want to track each year they're enrolled at the school. I can start to build reporting on this data. I can start to automate on this data. I can start to communicate and segment on all of this data. So custom objects gives you a very powerful way to expand the capabilities of HubSpot, while also still leveraging all of the power that HubSpot comes with at its foundational level. Here we have a couple of other examples of, we're talking about a shop, which I mentioned before. We are similar to the dealership. You're going to have your contacts, your prospects. We may have quotes. All this can be done with existing objects in HubSpot. Then we have our custom objects, which is our car appointments, jobs, and payments. And then we have our medical side of things. So if you don't know, HubSpot recently came out with the ability to store sensitive data. You also have the ability to have HIPAA compliance and those types of things as well. So if those are things that you need, you have an ability to activate that within your portal. So that will allow you to start to do things around medical and health and those types of things that have a little bit more sensitive data. Your custom objects might be visits, doctors, appointments, programs, prescriptions, again, fundraising campaigns, payments. And if we start to think on the nonprofit side, we get a little bit more aligned with, I think, the school side, where we have our volunteers, we have our programs, maybe advocacy, we have grants, engagement, events that we want to track, board and committee, fundraising, and payments. So here's the cool thing about objects is that they can be as simple or as complex as you need them to be. So what do I mean when I say as simple as complex as you need to be? So when you start to think about events, so we'll look at this today in our live demo, because we've actually built events into HubSpot, is that you can have something as simple as an event name, date, and time, and a description, and that gets associated to a contact, right? Or you could use something like what's built into HubSpot already, which is going to be like the events object, which actually integrates with like your Eventbrite or something like that, that will push in event data. What I'm specifically talking about here when I think about this custom object is a full-blown event management system, meaning that I have my events, I have tickets, I have registers, I have a checkout process, I have these events displaying on my website through the web services in HubSpot, where people can go fill out a form to register, things like that. Seat types, all those types of things. When you start thinking about that in HubSpot, so that means that I can go as simple as just the name, description, and date, or as complex as seats and tickets and different things like that in terms of registering. So that allows you, again, to build objects to the needs of your organization. For some, that might be really important to have tickets and seats, whereas others, they just want to know that person was at event A, right? And that's it. So let's go ahead and jump into our live demo and talk through that. So I'm going to jump over to our demo portal, and I'm going to show you the events object. But before I do that, I'm actually going to go to our event portal, our event website, which is called Direction Forward. This is one for some nonprofits that we work with. And I want to show this event page here. So you can see this. So on this page, we have upcoming events and we have some past events that are displaying here. And on the upcoming events, we can come in and see that this is going to be a virtual event, workshop, and we can click into that event and we see the event details and things on the page. And we can also click register, which brings us down to our tickets. So we have an upgraded ticket and a standard ticket, and we see we have 5 seats remaining. And we can go and register for this event. And if I go and register for the event, what's going to happen in this case is it's actually going to remove 1 seat from that event on the front end. So this is going to be more the front end side of the website. That is 100%. This website is built on HubSpot. The event stuff is built on HubSpot. Everything is pulling from there. So in HubSpot, you're going to see CRM, and then you're going to see your standard objects. And then under that, you have your custom objects. So you'll see we have a decent amount of custom objects within our demo portal that we are typically building for our clients and things like that. So if I go into events, I will actually see all the events listed here inside of the portal. And I believe the one I'm in is the get involved one, which I believe is this one here. So if I'm inside of this custom object, what I can see is information about the event, my descriptions, that I can then come in and edit, rich text style. And I can see the event status. So currently this event is active, but it can be in draft, past, full, or private, active private. Active private basically means that we see this a lot in the nonprofit sector or fundraising sector where we want an event, but we don't want it to actually show up on the website. So that way, only people that see that event are people that have been privately invited to the event. We also have the event type, whether it's free or paid. We're currently working on the paid version right now so that you can actually charge for tickets. Today, our event module uses free for free type events and tickets. Here, you're going to see information about the event. So when I talk about data, and I was like, you have to figure out what type of data you want to track. This is what I'm talking about, like the start date, the end dates, the time zone, the locations, who's the host of those events, the images that you want to show up, your tags for your events, and then your seats that you have there. In this case, because we're also pulling this information into the website, we're also tracking metadata so that our SEO stuff is working the way that we want it to work. On the right, you're going to see, like every other object, you're going to see things like contacts that are associated with this record, and you're going to see the tickets that are associated with the record, as well as the ticket types that we have here. And if a company was a connector or a household, that would also show up here as well to this event. The reason why we have this is that we might have a company that's hosting the event or that we're hosting an event on behalf of, and we may want to relate them to the event itself. That's going to all be there, but I can easily come in here and add a new ticket type if I wanted to. I can come in, add a ticket type, add a description, and give it all the information that I need. Now, one of the big problems that we wanted to solve for with events was going to be things like having to create a form for every single event. We wanted to solve for that. So with our event thing, we don't have to do that. We've done some custom stuff on the back end with some coding and things like that. So we essentially use one form that is unique to every event, but it's one form. Now, that's what I mean when I say you can go as complex or as simple as you want, right? So some of these things can be complex, some can be very simple. When we start to think about tracking activity, it works like any other object. I can put a note on this event. I can email from this event. I can track calls on the event. I can put tasks, right? So the task thing is actually pretty cool because one of the ways that we have seen this being utilized and that we recommend using it is that using the task to actually build out what needs to get done to pull off this event. So this might mean creating a task to, build the event graphics. This might be to get the lighting arranged, right? Whatever that is. So you're almost using it as the project management for the event. And obviously, depending on how complex your events may be, that may or may not be the best option. But in a lot of cases, this actually works pretty nice. The benefits here, though, is that we still have all of our collaboration tools with notes and things like that in HubSpot. So when I mentioned that we are able to use the foundational functionality of HubSpot, that's going to be the benefit of these custom objects. We still have all of our other properties as well, like any other object, where we can come in and see every single thing we have on different objects and things like that. So I can come in here and I can do an email directly to everyone registered to this event. One of the things that we're currently working on right now is things like the checkout process. Check-in process for events and making sure all that stuff works. But behind this, when you start to think about the type of things that you can do, is you can see all the different things that you can integrate with your forms, your lists, and all those things, right? So now you can start to build automations. For example, when somebody registers for a ticket, then send them out a registration email. When somebody checks in, send them a check-in email, right? Send them a thank you email for attending the event. For people that did not come to the event, then you can also send them a message for, hey, sorry we missed you, kind of a thing, if that's something that works for you. So you can do a lot of automation based on these objects as well. When you start to get over to things like reporting, you can start to build reporting in the object itself. Maybe we want to see like how many of what tickets we paid. So you can really start to build this out even more. And I believe, and I just want to check here really quick, because I believe we did, we may have a dashboard based on this, but let me just see here. Yeah, events dashboard. So it's super simple that we were working through just to kind of see like what does that look like. So if you wanted to look at the average slots filled per month, if you wanted to look at number of donations per household, things like that. So we may want to see like what is the donations of a household for people that went to X event. So you can build out a dashboard. As you can see, this is not fully built out, but you can build out a dashboard here to be everything you want on an event. Our thought process with reporting is that you kind of want a high level dashboard that kind of show overall events, but then you may want reporting within the specific event to show the stats for just that event. So you have a number of things you can do there. Another one that I'll show here for a second is going to be, I think I will show the one on connections. So connections is a way that we use to help nonprofits specifically track different types of connections. And what we're looking to do here with these connections is we want to understand if somebody is on a board or on a committee, or if they're part of a membership at that nonprofit or something like that. We want to be able to track that back. So I'm going to go into my demo contact here and show this. So inside of my demo contact, on the right side here, I'll be able to see obviously all of my objects that I have in the system. Now, if this was your live system, you may not want as much as we have in ours, but because we demo this a lot, things are here. But on this contact, I can come in and I can create a connection. So this is similar to engagement that you have in the center here, but it's going to be allow you to be a little bit more customized. So for example, let's say that I want to show membership, and that membership type is going to be, let's say, a Tocqueville member if you're like a United Way or something, or volunteer. Based on that, if I put that in there, I can add additional information if I want. I can associate that with a contact, and I can create that particular connection. So now I have this connection that is related to my record. Now, all these connections, typically we build them for clients, we're putting additional information on these. So for example, we want to know what is a term, like are they in this membership for from, let's say 2024 to 2025, and we want to change the status of that particular connection. So from active to completed and things like that. So there's a tons of things that you can do with the connection side of things. But what this does is it allows you to run different levels of reporting so that you can understand how many members do I have in X, and when are those members rolling off? Do we need to start fulfilling for future? But I also might want to just understand relationships in the sense of how many people are on the board at this organization, or how many people have been a committee member in this thing, right? And so this starts to give you more insights when you start to think about relationship building and understanding nonprofits and things like that in this use case. But connections could actually be used in a lot of different ways for a lot of different things. Not just that. For example, I was talking recently with building connections for a client that did not want to actually build a whole event management system because they use Eventbrite, but they wanted to be able to track if somebody attended, didn't attend, and then automate on that. And some of that the Eventbrite integration would do, but some of it did not. So we talked about connections being an option to show a connection to that event. So hopefully that makes sense. But you can, kind of get real creative with this stuff to build the different objects. Okay. So now we're right about the halfway mark. So I'm going to spend some time, since we've talked about objects. You will find your objects here if you have custom objects. We've talked about use cases for those custom objects and some of the things that you want to think about. I do want to take a moment to talk about some new stuff that HubSpot released recently, which is called app objects. So app objects actually work if you are on, I think, professional as well, maybe even starter. But if you scroll down, you will see this new object library in your settings. So if you go click on the little gear here, that'll bring you to this page. And if you scroll down to object library, these are going to be some libraries that HubSpot has pre-built into the system, as well as the ones that are there to try to help you build out your HubSpot system to track more things. You will start to see happen here over time is that partners like us and other partners will have an ability to actually build out objects that you would be able to either purchase or add to your system with clicks of a button, which is really, really nice. So I think that where we are seeing this going is HubSpot is realizing that building objects can get complex if you don't know how to do it. And so how can we equip organizations to be able to, just similar to the App Store, go and get objects? So right now, today, you have the ability to put in appointments. You can do courses, listings. So this is great if you're like real estate and services. And what's really cool about these is if you were to click on one of these, like let's say this one, you're going to see everything that's going to come into this, like things like pipelines and reports and things like that you can have. And you can go and read about each one of these things to see what this stuff is before actually setting it up. You can actually view other data templates as well that's going to come into the system. So you'll see here like these data templates of like real estate, right? So it's going to bring in listings, contacts, deals, and tickets. And this is how it's going to help you manage all the real estate side of things. If you're looking at education, it's going to allow you to do courses and contacts and relate courses to those contacts. Now, as you can probably tell and see, this is meant to be a proof of concept and show you what is possible with objects, but it's not always going to be a full-blown solution. If you're an organization that needs a very simple process, these pre-built ones are going to be great for that, and they'll probably meet your needs. But the beautiful thing is that you can build on and you can expand and really tailor it to your needs and what it is that you want to do. And so that's going to be the new thing coming to the CRM. Now, this page here, we're currently, if you go to data model, we are currently inside of the data model of HubSpot. So as you'll see in ours, you'll see we have a number of custom objects. In your system, you're not going to really see all these custom objects. You're going to see, if I turn that off, you're most likely going to see what's here. And I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. Let me just make this smaller. I'm going to zoom in on this a little bit. What this page does is it actually shows you how the CRM is actually structured from a data perspective. So it is actually showing you that there are companies, contacts, tickets. And if you hover over these, the lines are showing you how these objects are related. So companies are going to be related to your quotes. It's going to be related to your activity, your leads, and so on. You go to contacts, it's going to show what it's at. So when you start to think about custom objects, this is what I was talking about earlier when I said you want to think through associations of how do you want your data to be associated. So in our case, if we go to connections, you can see that connections are connected to activity and contacts. But there may be a use case where you want this connected to a deal or to a company and things like that. Same thing with events, event types. We can see what that stuff's connected to. So it's really cool as you can visually see the way your database is architected and see how that stuff is connecting within HubSpot itself. So hopefully all that made sense and that actually gave some insights into objects and what these are in custom objects. And how they make sense. One of the other things that I'll hit on is kind of some bonus content since we have a couple of minutes is association labels. If you're not using association labels, I strongly recommend you start to look into it and think about it. It is very powerful when it comes to really tailoring your CRM system. And I'll click and show what that is here for a second. Is if you go into like objects, for example, and let's just say contacts. I'm going to use an existing object for the time being because it'll be a little easier. We're going to contacts. You're going to see these different associations and association labels. And what it's going to allow you to do is actually, let me actually click on here and labels. It's going to actually allow you to define different labels for how things are connected. So for example, I could have two contacts connected, right? One contact connected to another contact. And I may want the association label to be spouse, right? That's going to allow me to track spouses and how they're related. Maybe that I have a couple contacts and one's related to a child, and I want the association label on the parent to show child and on the child to show parent. Maybe this is a person connected to a company, and I want on the if I'm on a contact record and I see the company, for it to say employer or previous employer. If I'm on the company, I want it to say employee or previous employee. Well, why this is important is that it's more than just looking good in terms of how we see our data structured. It actually allows us to segment down to our segments. I want to see all contacts in my database to have the association label of employee. Or I want to see all contacts in my database to have the association label of child. Same thing can come from automation. I want to send an automation to all companies related to contacts that have, the label employer, right? So you can get real granular with this, obviously, but the benefit is it's going to allow you to reach the right people within your organization. One good way that I see this being used a lot is when you start to think about sales. For example, I may want to do a label for the person that actually is truly the decision maker. I want to make a label for somebody that would handle the billing portion if this deal closes. I may want to do a label for somebody that would actually sign the proposal. So a lot of times with us, we're working with clients where the signer, the person paying, and the person actually advocating for this are all different individuals. And we want to track that so we can make sure we get the right information to the right person. So maybe the contract goes to the signer, but the quote, when that email goes out, it goes to the billing person, and so on and so on and so on. So that gives those association labels give you the ability to see how different objects are associated, not just associations, but all the way down to the way that they're associated. So that's where association labels comes into play. So if there's any questions, please drop them in the Q&A or in the chat. Let's see, we use them as primary contacts for a company, billing contacts. Oh, perfect. Yeah, so I see using as primary contact for a company, billing contacts, etc. Great way to use it. When you have 10, 15 contacts associated to a company, it's like, okay, which one do I reach out to? It's really nice to have those association labels to know if I have to reach out about billing, reach out to the billing contact, right? So association labels are great for that. Even if you're not using them in automations or segmentation, it's great of a way of labeling. Another way you're seeing this being utilized is HubSpot had the whole buyer decision, decision makers or buying power property on like a contact. Well, what you're starting to see individuals move to is to association labels for that. And I think HubSpot ultimately will eventually move to that as well at some point as the way of doing it, just because I think it makes a little bit more sense. So we actually use association labels internally as well. When somebody has stepped down, they're no longer at the company, but we want to keep the contact. We do that as well. Well, let's see, there are 3 only for now. Maybe to others. So I see there are those 3 the only ones. Any looking to others? I'm assuming that we're talking about the object library being these here or in the associated data where it showed the 3. I think HubSpot's goal here was to really show is build the model so that developers and partners can build these out for HubSpot customers. HubSpot typically is not building very specific or niche things typically. So I think this was like, how you'll see a lot of organizations where they'll essentially say, hey, we'll build the first few to show proof of concept and what this is, and to build the infrastructure to actually have an app library. But I think those future apps that will come actually come from a marketplace through partners and developers. Let me check the Q&A side. So I'm not seeing any questions there. If there's any more questions, I'll give it a couple more minutes. If you want to drop your questions in, this can be how they can be used. It can be a concept that you're thinking about, an idea that you have. I can try to answer those the best I can. While you guys are thinking through that, I'm going to take a sip of my coffee here. If you guys don't know me by now, I'm a huge coffee drinker, so you'll probably see me drinking coffee while we're on these calls from time to time. But also another thing I'll hit on is if you have not already, um, and you if you haven't already um, went and watched the recordings, we have those inside of our Community Process Connect community. Love to know. We have a poll on each one of these calls of if this information is useful. We're trying to make sure that we're bringing information that hopefully is helping your organization think about how it can operate more intentionally, whether that's process, whether that's the technology itself, whether that's enablement. How can you utilize HubSpot better, and how can you operate better? Those are ultimately our goals. If you guys have any questions about objects or want to see how objects fit into your organization and you guys need help with that, feel free to visit us at processology.com, processology.net, actually, that's a typo, .net /start. And you can also scan the QR code that's on the screen. I'll fix that really quick because that is my fault there. It's going to be processology.net /start, or you can scan the QR code. Love to talk with you and see what objects look like for you. Let's see here. I say, have you seen association labels for partner relationships? Yeah, you can definitely do association for partner relationships. I can tell you, like, a lot of times we'll use a property like inside of the system, like contact type or company type, and we'll put like partner in there. Usually that's like a multi-select property, because in some cases you can have a partner that's also a customer. In terms of association labels, though, that's also another great way I think that you can do that is put an association label for partnership relationships. Absolutely. Partnership contacts, partnership companies. We've actually done this for a nonprofit where they wanted to actually track community partners, and we use association labels to track those community partners. So absolutely, that's possible. And I'll tell you another thing too, like with that particular customer, when we did that, one of the things that we wanted to accomplish was surveying in nonprofit. And when you start thinking about surveying, you have all these different types of people involved in these events. You have the volunteers, you have the sponsoring organizations, you have the contacts that are part of those organizations. You may have corporate sponsorships. You have all these different types of individuals, and they all need to get a different survey and different communication. So the way that we did that was utilizing association labels. So as they're attaching individuals and companies to an event, a volunteer event or a regular event, they will be able to add that association label of how that organization or contact is related to that record. And then based on that, when the event is moved to complete, it will send out different emails that had different surveys and different workflows we had associated with that based on the association labels itself. One of the things that I will say with association where you have to be careful is you want to make sure that when you're doing these objects and you're adding the association labels, that you are accounting for them specifically. For example, if you start to take in association labels, HubSpot, I believe, recently built in where you can now require an association label, which is nice. It might be in beta still on like contact creation, for example. These are great ways because you do want to make sure that most of your workflows today probably do not consider an association label. So you may take some work to go back to those workflows and update them to say which types of contacts should receive this type of communication or go through this type of workflow by adding an association label. So for example, I may want this workflow only being triggered when a contact or company is does X, Y, and Z, and they have the association label of, let's say, partner relationship. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions, so we will shut it down there. Thank you so much for joining me on this event. Again, please, when we send out the event, do the poll. That's where the recording is going to be. Love to know if this content is the kind of content you want to see. And anything else, feel free to comment or reach out on those posts as well, and let us know if there's a certain subject that you're interested in. We'll love to know and love to make sure that we put those on the pipeline. Thank you.